Ja, hallo. Wir sind hier an einem frischen Frühlingsmorgen in Berlin, in einer schönen Bar, die extra für uns geöffnet hat, in Neukölln. Robert kennt die Gegend hier, hat er mir eben schon erzählt. Ich sitze hier nämlich mit Robert Forster, einem der großartigsten Songwriter, die es jemals von Brisbane ins Posh-Tackle in Neukölln geschafft haben. Und freue mich sehr. Robert ist gerade auf Tour, hat gestern ein fantastisches Konzert gespielt in Berlin. Und so, welcome Robert.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
What was it like yesterday? Did you like it?
I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was a really good show. It was like Lewis and I,
Lewis is your son,
my
right?
son,
Yeah.
who was in the Gunsax, who played, my son Lewis, who played on the Candle and the Flame album, my latest album, and him and I are on tour. And I think that was probably about the 12th show that we've done. And we played in the UK before that, and then now we're doing Germany. You know, we've sort of worked out that size of venue, about 400 or 500 people, with a good sound system, is perfect for us. You know, so the room was great. We're in the right place. Sometimes, you know, on this tour we've been in the wrong place. So we're in the right place. We played really well. You know, I thought it was the best show of the tour.
Do different cities have different energies when you're on stage? Do you feel this?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like we played Dublin. It's really weird, you know. Like we played Dublin, and that was incredible. That was an incredible show. That was probably the best show before this one. That was last Friday. You know, the Irish, and we played Belfast the night before, are amazing. You know, like Irish audiences always have been. They sing. They're very present. You know, like they're really. You know, you're playing in Dublin. You know, it's like. I tell musicians that play with me, I prepare them. I go, like, this crowd will really be on, and you've really got to be prepared. And they are just stunned, you know, at the start. It's like, so people just coming at you and really enthusiastic. The Dublin audiences are amazing. But then, you know, then you come to Hamburg, and it's like more reserved, of course, anywhere it would be, more reserved. But then, you know, like we play and we go down to the dressing room and people still clapping, and we have to come back up all those stairs and find the stage again. So it's really weird. Like the Germans are quieter, but then they'll clap long, and they want you to come back. Where in Dublin or other places they might be a lot clapper, and then when you finish they go, okay. There are differences, but the enthusiasm is still the same.
It was in the 80s with the Go-Betweens. You were on the cover of Specs magazine and stuff like that. So was this always that were more people interested here than everywhere else?
I'd say so. I think it was because the Go-Betweens at the time in the 80s, we were also, the Germans were interested in us because we were an interesting group. We were a good group. We had interesting texts. We were also from Australia, so there was that exotic angle. It was like the Germans had for 20 or 30 years English music, rock and roll, American music. There hadn't been much from Australia. And so there was a bit of a wave in the 80s with the birthday party at Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, the Triffids and ourselves. So people were talking about an Australian sound, an Australian attitude. So that was one part of it. And journalists and audiences were interested. They'd talk to us about Australia. After shows, you'd be talking to people, and you know, and what's Australia like, and why do you sound like this, and all of that. I think the other thing was that we were a different kind of rock group, and that we were interested in stuff. They were interested in us, but we were interested in Berlin and Hamburg and Munich, and like, what's happening here? Where can we go? We were culturally, although we didn't know much, we could talk to journalists. Really cliche thing, you know, the films of Fassbinder, you know, Werner Herzog, and you know, Isherwood, Christopher Isherwood, the English writer that came to Berlin. And there was just certain cultural things that we were interested in Germany that I don't think normal rock bands were. you know. And so I think with Lindy and Grant and myself and Robert Vickers, we were culturally interested in what we were experiencing, because for us also, being in a rock band was about traveling and discovering. And I think that sort of made us a little bit different. Well, let's play Hamburg because the Beatles played there in 1962, you know, and that's it. Do you know what I mean? It was like, no, Germany's more than that. So I think, you know, that's a long answer, but I think that's what it was.
Speaking of the Beatles, you went to Abbey Road just recently, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah. Which were, I went to Abbey Road it's about 10 days ago, and to master two of my albums that are coming out on Needle Mythology. They're two of my 90s albums are being remastered and reissued.
So it's Warm Nights
and one's got a new title.
Oh.
It was called I Had a New York Girlfriend.
Yes.
But now it's going back to what I had as its, I can't tell you unfortunately, it's going back to what was its original and better title. When it comes to redoing my back catalogue, I mess with it. Do you know what I mean?
Like Morrissey.
Like Morrissey, yeah, exactly. I new cover, that's what I really wanted, all of that sort of stuff. But some of it stays the same, like Danger in the Past is the same, because I really liked it. And so we went there to remaster it, and it was very moving. I'm not a Beatles, you know, like super fan. It was a Sunday, and I got there at 10 o'clock. The mastering engineer was there, and someone must have put a word through from Needle Mythology that I wanted a bit of a tour, like everyone. And the mastering engineer, it's 10 o'clock Sunday morning, and he said, "You're very, very lucky. I can show you around, and every studio is empty." He said that doesn't happen much at all. So we went to Studio 3 first, upstairs, where Pink Floyd did Dark Side of the Moon. And then we went to 2, and that was just amazing, which is where the Beatles did all of their albums except for Let It Be, I believe. And that, you know, like, that was just extraordinary. You know, like to go down there. Have you been there?
Yeah, a few times. Yeah.
So you've been to 2?
I've been to 2 with Paul McCartney.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you interviewed it even there?
Well, interview would be too much, but I was there when he played one of his side projects called The Fireman, one album, and so there were drinks and there was something to eat, and they played the album and we were drinking. At one point, Paul McCartney was standing in the middle of the room and said, "Hello, guys," and then he went from journalist to have a small talk. And I was already a little bit drunk, so I could ask all the questions I wouldn't have dared to ask if I would have been sober, which was good, I guess.
And how many journalists were there?
Probably about 30 something.
So were you downstairs on the floor?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the speakers were set up, and they were playing the Fireman album.
Well, that was over. The Fireman album was over, and it was just like having drinks and stuff. And then Paul McCartney walked in. And said,
"Did you know he was going to walk in?"
No, I didn't.
So that was a surprise.
Yeah.
And there was journalists from all over Europe.
Yeah, it was our mutual friend Robert Forster was there, who was a musician as well, and a writer for Rolling Stone. And we were talking about, I guess, we were just joking around, just talking in Beatles lyrics or something like that. And then Robert pointed to the door and said, "Listen to what the man says." And then I looked at the door and there was Paul McCartney. So yeah, and then we talked to him.
Right, and he was nice.
He was great. Yeah. I mean, you never get really near him because he's a star. He's very guarded in what he says and stuff. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah, no, I mean, it was amazing being in the room. You know, and it was sort of, I don't know, the weird thing is, and I don't know if you picked this up, and I don't know if it's been written in any Beatles book, you'd know. But when I went there, and we're talking to the mastering guy had been there for 28 years, and he said, and when we got down there, it was Sunday morning, 10 a.m., and I was smelling it, the room, and this sort of damp smell came through. And he said there's pipes underneath the floor, and he said it gives it this sort of faintly weird smell. And then I thought, well, the Beatles must have been here recording all these albums with this sort of weird, slightly weird smell. Do people talk about this?
I think I...
Did you pick it up?
Sure. No, I didn't.
Okay.
But maybe there's a book there.
There could be a book
about
there.
The smell of Abbey Road.
The smell of it. And, because I thought the Beatles, they must have done Revolver and Rubber Soul and Sgt. Pepper, and this sort of faintly weird smell. He said that, there's old pipes, water pipes, going right on the studio that they can't change. But it was great, it reminded me when I was on the piano here, because it was very quick, it was quite quick. But going down the stairs and knowing the Beatles, basically they spent the 60s going up and down those stairs.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is like the control room where the producer was upstairs.
Yeah, it's up there.
And so they were like the little kids on the playground, and the producer was watching them. So. Yeah,
I mean, I'd seen those photos. I knew that angle, and I knew there was a staircase. But to go up and down, it was really that was almost the biggest thing for me, going down that staircase.
Yeah.
I looked over and I saw the one thing I talked was I said, "There's a piano over there, an old piano," and he went, "Oh, that's the Mrs. Mills piano."
Oh, Lady Madonna.
And he opened it up, and the keys are like brown and just nothing's been done to it since the 60s or even the 50s or the 40s. And it's an upright. It's pretty much just like that, and but dark wood. And he lifted it, and I just played a few chords, and you just sort of wow. That was really, so this is the piano, the beat, and it was not only on Lady Madonna, I think they used it on a couple of things. So you're there and you just sort of, that's a moment when you're playing that piano. And then we went through to Studio One, which is where they do all the soundtracks, where they do all of, which is like in the Flughafen, like it's just a, have you been there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And where they did the Star Wars and all that.
Yeah. Well, Judge Martin, who has an office there, and he showed me around once.
Oh, that must have been great. Yeah, I mean, being in Studio 2 was really, really special. And like they told me, you can, because I knew I wouldn't be allowed to see them, but I was very interested in the microphones. But I knew they'd be, and I said, so all the original 60s mics are here and stuff. And he said, yeah, they're all catalogued. And he said, you can come in, and he said, artists can come in, you could come in here, and it's all catalogued. So you could come in, I'd be in the studio hiring it, as a band, and go, I want the microphone that John Lennon did, the lead vocal on Ticket to Ride.
Oh, really?
And they can get that mic. It's all the mics that we used on all the tracks are in catalogues, which George Martin would have done, and so you could, they can go, okay, it'll probably take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and they can get the mic that Lennon used on Ticket to Ride, and it can be put right, and then you're singing with that mic.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, okay, and like this is a mastering engineer that's been there 28 years, he knows this. It's all very, very well catalogued.
Speaking of bands, we just mentioned it before, but the older people will remember you played in a band called the Go-Betweens.
Yeah.
How important is the legacy of the band for you right now? Is this still something that is important to you, or did you move forward?
It is. It's very important. I feel I have a good relationship with the band. I haven't let it, I don't think, swamp me. It's really easy, like you'd interviewed people who were in like well-known bands or great bands in their 20s and 30s, and you can meet them in their 50s and 60s or 70s, and it's still on them. You know what I mean? I think I have a fairly good relationship with the band. I adore the band. I love the band. But I'm really happy with what I'm doing now. We've started work on box set 3. Like two box sets of the band have come out on Domino Records, chronicling the 70s and the 80s, and we're just about to do a very big box set on the years 2000 to 2006, which has started, which I think is going to be amazing.
So do you already have a release date for that?
We're hoping next year. That I think we'll definitely hit next year. It's because of COVID, it's been stalled, it's stopped. But now it's sort of suddenly come back to life, and there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of things being done. It's going to happen.
You played one song yesterday of your songwriting part in the Go-Betweens, Lennon, A Boundary Rider, which was of the last Go-Betweens album, Oceans Apart, and wasn't recorded at the sessions in London where the rest was recorded, but it was like, because you were working on an instrumental then that didn't work out.
Yeah.
So all those kind of like lost tracks on the album?
The Oceans Apart Rarities CD doubles is amazing. Like this is going to be, like there was a couple of unreleased tracks on Volume 1, there's just a couple on Volume 2. There's 80 on this one. Like there's demos, there's 4 demo sessions for Oceans Apart. There's 2 that I knew of, acoustic ones that Grant and I did, where Boundary Rider was done in Brisbane, the version that's on the album. And then there was a band one that I didn't know, I'd forgotten about, which we did in the studio. So it's with Glenn and Adele, who were in the band, the Go-Betweens, that's done. And so I half knew about that, and then I heard that. So there's 3, and then, this was the big discovery, there was the sessions for Oceans Apart were uncovered, and in it, the band, which I don't remember, we play the whole album, which I've never heard of. We demo the whole album in the studio. We play the record, and it's, you can hear we're playing live, but with different bits. But not, done months before, but it's like if the Beatles went in and did Rubber Soul, and then they played the whole album live over one day, and then they recorded the album over 3 weeks. Well, we've got that one day thing where we just, and so there's 4, in terms of, what the album became, it's absolutely fascinating to me. So there's about 40 tracks that, besides 1 or 2, there's 40 tracks that no one's heard, just for one album.
And also like songs we haven't heard, or is it just?
There's a couple of songs that Grant did on a couple of the demo sessions that have never been heard. He always had a lot of songs, and so there's songs that have never been released. All those demos haven't been released, but there's a lot of songs that no one's ever heard that never made it to albums or B-sides.
Your songwriting process was a little bit slower than Grant's songwriting process.
Yeah.
Is it still like that? You have like 2 or 3 songs a year? Is this still the? Did this change over the years, or was it like that when you were 20 as well?
No. When I was 20, when I think this is common. When I was 20 to 21, I wrote, it just bleh, and I was writing 2 songs a week. And often we'd play them. There's like 50 or 60 songs that we would have played in Brisbane in 1978, 79 that just don't exist. And we'd play them once. Yeah. So I'd write a song on Monday, we'd rehearse, we'd play a show on Friday night, we'd play that song. If it wasn't any good, it'd be gone. And then when Grant started to write songs in 1980, 81, he wrote about 60 songs in his first 2 years as well. I think it's common, And then I just settled into this pattern where I just wrote 2 songs a year, maybe 3. It's been the same. I used to worry about it, but I don't anymore. I know that's my process.
You got back to the time when you were 20, 21 in 2 songs recently. On your last album's Fame, on the album Inferno, and on the new one is one that is called When I Was a Young Man. What was so important about this time that this went back into your?
Like when I wrote When I Was a Young Man, I searched for the ideas because it's a song I love. To me, it's one of the best songs I've ever written. And I start to wonder, well, where does that come from? Because I actually wrote the song in 2018, and I had a different lyric, and I wasn't happy with it. I just thought, I've done this before. And something, if I went back to my diary, I might just get the moment, because it was something completely different. And it was like a song I'd written from 2008, 2007. And that's not good enough. The one, there's 2 clues I have for the song. But it's always, as you would know, asking an artist about where they get their inspiration. They're almost the most unreliable people. Do you know what I mean? But the 2 ideas I have is, There was a radio show in Australia, and I can only imagine this was right at the back of my brain. There was a radio show in Australia, and it's like the year that changed you, which I'd hear on the radio every now and then. And people would talk, famous people would talk about the year where their life changed. And for me, it was when I was 21. And when I was 21, I moved out of home. The Go-Betweens' first record came out. I started to write my first really good songs. And there was suddenly momentum in my life. I was a little bit lost before that. And so that I really see as the year that I was there, and then suddenly I was there. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was in the back of my mind. And the other thing was that there's a book by James Joyce called Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, which I always love that title. I love the book. There's also a traditional folk song called I Was Young When I Left Home. Mm-hmm. Somewhere between when I was young, I left home, Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, when I was a young man. Those song titles were in the back of my head, that book title. I can only imagine that one moment when I was trying, all of that just came. I don't know how, but it just, and then I had it.
The interesting thing about this song is you're talking about your beginnings as an artist.
Yes.
But it's not like in the Springsteen narrative where someone has to break out of home and run away and stuff like that. There's no conflict there in a way, or was there a conflict?
No, there wasn't. You're exactly right. It was more an awakening.
Yeah.
It was more, suddenly I was out of my suburban family house. It's like if you're from some small town anywhere in Germany, and you're with your family, and you're with all your friends from school, and you're doing what you're doing since you were 5 years old. You know, like you're in school, and you're in this village, and you're with the same people, and suddenly you go, at 21, I'm going to go to Berlin. And it's like, either good things happen or bad, but that's the change, that's the moment, and suddenly it's like, okay, I'm meeting new people, I'm on my own, I've got to make decisions for myself, I've got to create art, I'm away. And you're scared, you know, but at the same time, you're free. Mm-hmm. It's that moment.
Is this something you felt as well when the Go-Betweens ended, being scared and being free at the same time?
Yes, it was. There was a great sense. There was a great sense of. This is something that's come to me very much over the last. Thinking about this record and thinking about things recently, I think that my time in Bavaria in 1989, I moved in with Karen Boimler into a farmhouse in Germany, and the rest of the Go-Betweens went back to Australia. The last show was in Munich with REM at Circus Kronig. And I see that now really as, in a way which I didn't see it at the time, was in a part the end of the Go-Betweens. You know, like I now see, I had 3 months with Karen and Erhard in this farmhouse. It was hard to go back to the Go-Betweens after that. Mm-hmm. You know, like, and I didn't see it at the time, and I now see that was, I saw a new life, and I had new feelings, and I had new feelings about music. I started to write songs like Danger in the Past that the Go-Betweens couldn't play. And it was nothing, you know, nothing about the band, but that was the moment where I started to, and it was a sense of freedom. This is the next chapter. I didn't really know it, because I obviously went back to Sydney. We tried to make a Go-Betweens album, and it didn't work. But that was a big moment now. I see the importance of it more now.
Mm. And what was it like when the Go-Betweens finally ended?
You know, like there was a sense of, you know, like with Grant passing.
Yeah, Grant passing.
Well, I mean, it was very traumatic at the time. And like I was shaken for a couple of years because, you know, like the friendship with Grant McLennan, the other songwriter in the Go-Betweens, obviously went back to before the band started. Mm. You know, Grant and I met each other when we were 17, and the band didn't really start till we were 20. You know, I really missed Grant as a friend. And I was in shock for a while. The Evangelist, that album, is totally taken up with that, the passing of Grant, and Grant's very much on that album. But I knew that I was capable of writing songs, even if it was only 2 a year, that I would, that I would go on. In a way, I knew I could write songs. I knew I could make albums. It wasn't like, the death of someone in a band where that would just shatter everything, I knew it wouldn't. And I'd also started writing music criticism for the Monthly, so I had this other career going. Suddenly I was a writer, and I was a music journalist because I got this job working for the Monthly and a magazine. So suddenly I had this new career a year before Grant died, so suddenly that took me on as well.
Ah, yeah. So did this influence your creative process as a songwriter as well, or was this?
I don't think so. I think I was a natural as a music journalist because I'd always sort of thought of music that way. I was almost like writing imaginary reviews in my head of records I was listening to in the 70s and 80s. A lot of musicians, a lot of people listen to music, and you listen to an album and you can just experience it just as that, Well, I was always a little bit, why are they doing that? What, like they've got a different producer on this record. Oh, I can hear what that does. I had an analytical thing with music always, with also a love of music. So I think that sort of meant that I had some sort of ability to write about it.
You're writing a novel now.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes, I am writing a novel. I've been writing it for I started in 2017. I've been writing off and on. It's getting better. It's taken longer than I thought. Two things have happened with the book. Because it's my first novel, I'm learning to write a novel, how to write a novel, and I'm writing a novel. I'm doing two things at the one time. So I've made mistakes, and I'm learning the process while I do it, which means it's taken longer. I'm really happy with it. It's getting better. I'm writing a new ending at the moment. I really like it. I can't tell when it's going to come out. I can't tell what people are going to think about it. I don't know if my editor's going to like it. I have no idea.
Suppose there would be a character in the novel who's really evil. What kind of music would you listen to?
Well, there's an evil character in the probably new romantic music.
Like Spandau Ballet?
Oh no, I love Spandau. No, more Visage maybe. Maybe even some new romantic that we don't, fringe new romantic. That could be the music that the villain listens to. See, that could be in a Bond film, like the villain in a Bond film, and they're in the Swiss, they're always in Switzerland, in this sort of tower, and they're listening to Visage. It's that sort of book.
Well, thanks a lot, Robert.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.